Markets open across the continent as well, and we are mildly, I would suggest, in positive territory, but obviously it's very early days in the opening rotation. A lot of data due this week as well. There was some important data at the tail end of last week with that PCE number. We've got the Fed chair speaking later in the week. We've got the president speaking to Congress earlier in the week, plus we've got payrolls on Friday. But of course the big news over the last 72 hours is the extraordinary events in the Oval Office in the White House between Ukraine and the United States, and then the European reaction over the weekend as well. How much is this having a bearing on individual stocks and sectors? Well, certainly on some, a very big bearing as well. We'll come to that in a few moments' time. Let's take a look at the sectors that are in positive territory. And defence names, industrial names will be to the fore. Oil and gas responding to the blip up we saw from the lows, albeit, as I say, oil's been under a lot of pressure in the last few weeks as well. But oil and gas stocks 0.9% higher. Industrials within that, of course, you will see some of the defence names. Again, we'll come to that in a short while. Insurers and healthcare also in positive territory. Are there any sectors in negative territory? Well, let's take a look. Household goods, which is the home of luxury goods, down 0.4%. Real estate and autos also losing a little bit of ground. Let's take a look at the broader bourses. Again, very, very early days. In fact, so early days we don't even have a print on Germany just yet. But mild inclines. We were called a little bit higher up than that. So when we're fully open, the traders are expecting us to be around about 0.4% higher on, for instance, the London market. Other indices look like this, including Zurich, Lisbon, Madrid and Amsterdam, flat to mildly higher. European nations have pledged to step up defence spending after a public breakdown in relations between the US and Ukraine. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer announced an additional £1.6 billion of UK export finance for Ukraine to buy air defence missiles. The UK government also planning to change the remit of its £27.8 billion wealth fund so it can be spent on defence. The French President Emmanuel Macron called on Europeans to dramatically increase their defence spending to more than 3% of GDP. Whilst Reuters has reported that the German political parties in coalition talks have considered a special defence fund worth as much as €400 billion. There's a lot going on, and what we'll do is we'll keep showing you those defence names over the next few minutes as well, because we are expecting dramatic inclines for the likes of Rheinmetall, Hensoldt, BAE Systems, Thales and Rolls-Royce as well. Ray Sharm Ong is head of multi-asset investment solutions for Southeast Asia at Aberdeen and joins us now. Really nice to see you, sir. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Well, thankfully you've furnished us with notes not just about Asia, and I do want to focus on that at some stage as well, sure, but also on the global world. When you watch events that we saw in the Oval Office on Friday, like all of us, you will be amazed, astonished, maybe even aghast, who knows. But you then obviously start thinking, well, how does this affect my universe? And I think that's what I'd like to ask you for our viewers' sake as well. How do those kind of events affect where you allocate money?
So last 72 hours, the meltdown between the US and Ukraine president, we maintain a base case of scenarios. So you would look at what if this melts down and whether a ceasefire will potentially happen or it does not on that end. So we work out what the scenarios would be and determine how to allocate accordingly, for example. Okay,
and so you're actively going through that process now as well. The market has made its decision up, for instance, about this stock. It is a defence name. It is one of the biggest defence names in Europe, and I suggest any of our viewers just go onto their website. You'll be amazed at the kit that they produce as well. They're up 168% over last year, 14% today. So you're kind of pushing on an open door at the moment. My question isn't should one have defence stocks? My question is perhaps more, are we too late into that thematic if our viewers haven't already been in these stocks?
So there will definitely be an increase in defense spending. It's just a question of how much and to how much of an extent. If the Ukraine ceasefire does not happen, and the key point to watch would be Trump is going to address at the State of the Union this week. He may potentially announce a result there, he may not, but if he announces a result that potentially they may push through, then perhaps slightly less spending. But on the end, I don't think the markets have fully priced in how much spend that needs to happen. So it is definitely on the cards, and it's something that actually would also help European fiscal. European economic growth would actually likely benefit from an increase in this, as well as sentiment on European stocks.
How would that help European fiscal, given the fact that European fiscal position is challenged in every single country, apart from maybe one or two, including Germany as well? How does the fiscal position improve?
So it's going to improve on multiple fronts. So European, we look at it from whether it affects European equities, for example, defense stocks, and how it potentially goes up. If you do have some form of a European ceasefire, for example, in Ukraine, you would have geopolitical risk premium potentially coming off.
Right.
Inflation potentially lighter, your yields would potentially come lower. Borrowing will become slightly cheaper on that. Right. That helps the fiscal impulse. Allows Germany maybe to push their fiscal cap on that end, and perhaps helps makes borrowing a little easier.
Even with defence in Ukraine, Europe finally, it appears, over the last few years, to be fair, it's been a process, taking its own defence even more seriously as well. Someone has to pay for reconstruction in Ukraine as well. Someone has to pay for reconstruction in Europe of our infrastructure, of our digital infrastructure as well, building up our own security in many, many ways as well. Again, all of those things are pressure on the fiscal budget, aren't they?
Yes, it is. You can raise fiscal caps, that's one.
Right.
You can make fiscal borrowing a little cheaper, controlling at the back end. The third is the European Stability Mechanism. They can potentially deploy that. That could also potentially help. So there are three avenues to help.
And I've spoken to various bosses of the ESM over the years as well. And the criticism I've given to them over the years is it comes with a stigma. When you go to the ESM, you go to these lending facilities, you have to take on all kinds of public commitments, you're almost on the naughty step, so to speak, as well. If the ESM doesn't get reformed, is it going to get used?
It is one avenue that you can potentially explore. If you really need to support, then I think it would be one avenue that you potentially put.
All right, let me move on from Europe, because one thing that's really encouraging in our earlier headlines is the manufacturing data out of China. We're all looking to see as and when we get a meaningful recovery, and it's got to come from the consumer as well. These amazing savings rate, and yet they are spending money, it appears, on EVs. And so when the manufacturing data and the EV data give me hope that actually China's finding a floor.
Well, actually, I think China isn't at the floor, it's actually at the cups of actually doing pretty well on that end. You look at China across multiple lenses, the macro lens, the monetary lens, the fiscal lens, as well as the equity stock market fundamentals. Monetary, they will be extremely supportive. We actually do expect them to do more triple R cuts, interest rate cuts. Fiscal, I think they have held their cards pretty close to their chest. For example, they have the 2 sessions here. They're going to wait probably up until the official announcement of tariffs before determining how much to actually utilize and announce on that end. And then on earnings, as you may have heard, there's been a huge shift from investing in tech in the US to maybe investing in tech in China because of the surge of
I may have heard something about some company called DeepSeek, and then President Xi talking to the tech leaders as well. So
that's right.
That last point is really interesting, because there was a time when there was a Xi crackdown on many, many sectors as well, education, technology, to name just but 2 as well. And people thought, wow, that makes China uninvestable. Did they misread what actually was going on from the Chinese Communist Party and the leadership?
I would say China is investable. It is definitely not uninvestable. They've actually been open, but you have to invest in line with what the policy initiatives are.
Right.
So right now the policy initiative is to actually focus on tech and develop tech and AI. It actually is a game changer. You divest out of maybe the US tech into China tech on that end. China has also decided to plow about 500 in CNY into AI. So we do see earnings revisions coming in the near term, and we expect that to be a multi-year change.
This is fascinating. And people talk about zero-sum gains, or they talk about US exceptionalism, or the Mag 7, what have you. China upsetting the US hegemony apple cart, if that isn't a complete and utter mouthful. That is potentially a big risk to these high multiples in the United States, or actually it's not a threat to the US as well. I mean, it's probably one of the biggest questions that we need to ask is the exceptional multiples a lot of US technology valuations have had, in both in the private and public markets, from OpenAI, etc. Is that threatened by what we're seeing in China?
So on a multiple basis, likely a shift. But on an earnings perspective, I think the US is still likely to dominate. a lot of the technology, the GPU chips that are produced by NVIDIA are utilized also by the other peers investing in AI. Yeah. They may not use the latest, but they're still also utilizing.
And those export curbs aren't quite as tight as one thought they would be.
Exactly. And personally, I do feel that the market sell-off that we are currently seeing, I don't think it can be sustained. You eventually will get some form of a policy announcement, policy rescue that will likely lead to a flooring.
In the United States?
Yes, it's definitely on the cards.
So hang on, a policy announcement that will come to the rescue of the Mag 7?
No, that will help to rescue fundamentals as well as sentiment on the markets. Big case in point is we personally feel that markets are underpricing the Fed cuts.
Yes.
So markets are currently pricing 2.5 cuts for the rest of the year. You have a scenario where maybe the macro data, like you mentioned, is on the downside. Yeah. You have the federal layoffs on the cut. So that's really going to depress growth. The Fed is not going to sit on their hands. Right now, they're focusing on inflation. A few weeks down the road, if they realize that growth is something, they're going to start changing the tone. Yeah. They're probably going to say, we're going to look at cutting, or we're looking at supporting the economy.
So it'll be monetary policy rather than government policy that will come to
so more monetary than the fiscal impulse on that end.
We've covered a lot of ground. Very nice to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for your time today. Ray Sharma Ong, who is Head of Multi-Asset Investment Solutions for Southeast Asia over at Aberdeen. We covered a lot of other ground as well, so thank you for that, sir. Bunzl posted a more than 3% increase in full-year revenue at constant exchange rates, with the company saying that underlying trends improved in the second half amid slight volume growth and easing deflation. The Distribution and Services Group reiterated its guidance for 2025 despite economic and geopolitical uncertainties. Shell is reportedly exploring the sale of its chemical assets in Europe and the United States. Wow, that's fascinating. According to the Wall Street Journal, the oil giant is said to be in the early stages of the process as it prioritizes its most profitable operations. The ECB and Deutsche Bank reportedly clashed in 2024 over concerns about the lender's credit risk management. This according to the FT. The central bank reportedly raised concerns multiple times, with Deutsche Bank warning twice that provisions for bad loan losses would be higher than initially expected. Coming up on the show, Europe looks to respond as talks between Trump and Zelenskyy collapse in dramatic fashion. We'll have the latest next. let's take a look at the major European bourses, and they have picked up ahead of steam. The spreadbettors actually nailed it this morning. I've certainly lambast them when they get it wrong, but no, well played. They got it spot on to the decimal, really. The German market leading the way higher. Of course it is, because of those big names, such as Rheinmetall. And the boost they've got from the most extraordinary, astonishing, amazing, pick your superlative events, tragic, whatever you want to call it, for events on Friday evening in the Oval Office. Let's take a look at Spanish data as well. Manufacturing PMI, wow, that's interesting, because Spain's been a bit of an outperformer, but it's a soggy old manufacturing PMI coming in at 49.7 versus the January figure of 50.9. So back into contraction territory, albeit by 0.3 of 1%. So, talking of those events, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer says European leaders have agreed to draw up a plan for peace in Ukraine to present to the United States. Starmer said countries, including the UK and France, would join others in a, quote, coalition of the willing to contribute military support to defend any future ceasefire agreement. They will also raise defence spending, with the Prime Minister announcing an additional £1.6 billion of UK export finance for Ukraine to buy air defence missiles. Speaking to the newspaper Le Figaro, the French President Emmanuel Macron said the plan would include an initial 1-month partial truce between Russia and Ukraine, covering air, sea and energy infrastructure. Starmer said he's confident the plan would win the support of President Trump.
The US has been a reliable ally to the UK for many decades and continues to be. There are no two countries as closely aligned as our two countries, and our defence, our security and intelligence is intertwined in a way no two other countries are. So it's an important and reliable ally for us. The discussions we've had today, particularly the coalition of the willing, is on the basis that this is a plan that we will work with the US, and that it will have US backing.
The Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, who's in an awkward position, we can explain that why in a few moments' time, met Starmer ahead of the summit, calling for unity.
We are all very committed about a goal that we all want to achieve, which is a just and lasting peace in Ukraine. And I think it is very important that we avoid the risk that the West divides. And I think on this, UK and Italy can play an important role in bridge building, let's say.
Yeah.
So you know that I've been also proposing a meeting between US and European leaders for if we divide ourselves, that will make us all weaker.
I don't want to take away time from my next guest or my next colleague, but just to say very briefly, the reason why I think Meloni's in a difficult position, because she was seen originally as the olive branch between Europe and the United States, very much aligned with President Trump on some issues as well. The problem is, if he wants more defence spending, Italy's got to really put its socks up, because they are way behind some of the biggest players in Europe. OK, let's move on. The London summit took on extra significance after White House talks between President Trump, Vice President Vance and Ukrainian President Zelenskyy descended into argument before the world's media. And, of course, as you would have noted, one or two of the world's media decided to get on the back of the Ukrainian president as well. But that was, personally, I think that last bit was a disgraceful point from one of the media organisations present. But there you go. It was a tense Oval Office meeting. Trump and Zelenskyy had been expected to finalise an economic agreement over Ukrainian critical minerals, but the talks fell apart and a press conference was cancelled after the exchange.
First of all, during the war, everybody has problems. Even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless. God bless. You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that. Remember this. You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
You will feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards.
Playing cards.
Right now, you don't. You're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country, that's
with
backed
all respect to
you
your
far
country.
more than a lot of people said they
respect.
should have.
Have you said
Zelenskyy has faced calls from senior Republican lawmakers to consider resigning after his visit. The Ukrainian president spoke to our sister channel Sky News at a press briefing before he left the UK, reiterating his stance that he would consider stepping down if his country secures NATO membership.
I said that I'd be exchanging it for NATO membership, which would mean that I'd fulfilled my mission. Although, honestly, it looks like some people, and I won't be naming their positions, but let's just say some citizens of other countries are telling Ukrainians which president they should have. Especially if these people occupy official posts, it seems to me unconstructive and undemocratic.
Let's take a look at some big moving names. Look at these numbers. Hensoldt, 18% higher. Thales, 17% higher. But what is fascinating as well, if you want more big numbers, is the European Stocks Aerospace and Defence Index. There is one out there as well. Currently up 7.5%. That is the biggest daily jump since November 2020. Well, European leaders will meet again on Thursday for an emergency defence-focused summit in Brussels. Silvia, we talk a great book in Europe. Are we going to actually act a great book?
It seems that so far we're heading into that direction. Let me share what I've gathered thus far. We did hear from the President of the European Council, Antonio Costa. He is hosting an emergency summit in Brussels on Thursday. And in his latest comments, he actually suggested that they will be taking first decisions for the short term. For the first time in a very long time, we are hearing concrete comments from the President of the European Council suggesting that there will be decisions taken on Thursday. So all eyes on that summit. Now, I've been speaking to some European officials this morning, and one of them highlighted to me what we can expect on Thursday. Here's some news for you. We are expecting the EU to announce concrete deliverables, in particular when it comes to the financing of defense. We had heard already in the past the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, suggesting that they will make the fiscal rules more flexible for European countries so they can spend more on defense. But at this summit, they're expected to go beyond that. The same official also saying that on top of this flexibility, they are looking at additional funding sources for defense at the EU level. And on top of that, listen to this one, they're also looking at adapting the EIB mandate, so the mandate for the European Investment Bank, so they can spend more also on defense. Worth keeping in mind some context here. The European Investment Bank can only invest in defense projects if they have a dual mandate. Let's see what sort of announcements they will indeed put forward on Thursday, but no doubt that it seems that for the first time in a while, Steve, we could be actually looking at concrete announcements at the EU level. Just one final point to say that the discussion on Thursday is going to be structured in two moments. First, indeed, how they can do more on European defense, so an EU focus. And then the second part of the conversation focused on concrete support for Ukraine. And there we're going to hear them announcing perhaps also some concrete measures in terms of what they can do in terms of security guarantees for Ukraine as well. And of course, President Zelenskyy has also been invited to the summit.